The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
And welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. Today I have an amazing interview. It's one of those interviews where when I had it, I loved it and was just trying to soak it all in. But as I re-listened to it, as I was editing the audio and making sure everything sounded okay, I realized what a gem of a conversation this really was. Ryan Neal of Mirai, or Bonsai Mirai, had so much valuable knowledge surrounding bonsais. I learned so much from him. I felt invigorated to try bonsai. Perhaps you'll feel the same way as you listen to this, but it was such a great conversation. And I hope that you take some time to maybe look into some of the incredible work that he's doing and all of the educational content that he is putting out. Because I don't think anyone is putting out this level of quality bonsai education out there. And maybe that's not saying much because I'm not super into the bonsai world, but Ryan and his team are really doing incredible work. Before I play our interview, I do quickly want to go over our giveaway winners. This is something I do every single episode. I take 2 winners, one that has commented on Spotify and another that has left a review on Apple Podcasts. So our winner today on Spotify is Hayden Holloway. We were talking about orchids in our last episode and he said, I don't own any orchids, but my mom has some and I could recommend this to her. Thanks, Rachel. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Hayden, for your kind comment. Go ahead and email me at tennyplants@gmail.com. I will get your address so that way I can send a giveaway package your way. And what you win as a giveaway winner is a bottle of Prop Drops from Market Botany. Prop Drops are a water propagation aid for all your houseplants that you are propagating in water. I love their product and I'm so happy to have them helping out with the giveaways here on this podcast. And our next giveaway winner, this person left a review on Apple Podcasts. Their username is Fine Heine. I'm pretty sure that's how you would say it. But they said, I love listening to the specific plant care episodes. I'm currently expanding my plant collection lately, and this podcast is helping me so much. I typically put it on when I'm mowing my lawn or taking long drives, and I love all the information that is provided. She keeps it interesting and is not dry. Thank you. I appreciate the plant history she goes over and little points like the plant's meaning. I'm currently propagating some peperomia leaves I accumulated, and I'm ready to move them to soil. And this recent peperomia episode reminded me I have a plant chore to do, but also preparing me to provide the best care for my newest plant. I love that. Thank you so much for that kind review. If that was you that left that review, Fine Heine, go ahead and email me at tennyplants@gmail.com and we will get that giveaway package sent your way as well. For anyone wanting to enter in for a future giveaway, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave a review. And if you are listening on Spotify, feel free to comment on this episode. I want to hear, for all of you commenting on Spotify, comment if you own a bonsai. I'm so interested to know how many of you are involved in this world, because truly, it is something that I want to get more into. All right, and with all of that taken care of, I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did with Ryan Neal of Bonsai Mirai. All right, we are here with Ryan Neal today on the Plant School podcast. Very excited for this episode. The art of bonsai is something that has intrigued me for a long time, but I don't know a whole lot about it. So today we're going to learn some more about it because Ryan Neal, he is someone that has created this whole company. It's called Mirai, and you educate bonsai creators. You are also curating bonsai artistry, and also you guys say that you are creating trees that can connect to you, which I thought was very cool. But I wanted to start with this question, Ryan, and that is, how did you very first become interested in bonsai?
Yeah, my interest in bonsai was more like a kind of immaculate conception to a degree. I was really interested in martial arts when I was a kid. I studied Taekwondo for almost 10 years growing up, and through that, had an awareness of the Karate Kid, and really, the Karate Kid was not my beginning in bonsai. It was my introduction to bonsai being a thing, right? But I was still more interested in Ralph Macchio, kicking Cobra Kai's ass, and Mr. Miyagi being this kind of hard but nice guy for Daniel's son and whatnot. But my mom, we had a local fair, Strawberry Days, where I grew up in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And my mom used to always say, there's a guy there selling bonsai trees. You should go check it out. And I don't know why she wanted me to go check it out, but I guess maybe she thought it would be something that I could do to pass my time, or moms are always trying to find things for their kids to do. And so I went down to Strawberry Days, and I was walking towards this tent, and I saw people walking out with bonsai trees. And I was like, oh my gosh, normal people can do this? Normal people can grow bonsai trees? Because I had thought from my experience with the Karate Kid that it was completely limited to a sophisticated martial arts monk figure that was doing this, and here these normal people were going in and picking up a bonsai tree and leaving, and it's oh my gosh, somebody let them take that tree. But I felt I don't want to buy a pre-made bonsai. I want to make my own tree. I want to understand this and learn about it. And this all happened in a matter of moments as I'm sitting there digesting all of this, thinking about Mr. Miyagi and his garden and these things that he was doing, and seeing these people walk away. So I actually got on my bike at that moment, and I rode to the public library, and I checked out 12 books on bonsai. Then I walked home. I think I kept those books for 4 or 5 months. I had, at the time when I was 12, a very minor amount of library overdue fees, but it felt astronomical to me. But it was totally worth it because I just sat and fixated and fascinated over these books. And I realized very quickly that that was what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I mean, it was moment, instantaneous, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is amazing. And a month after I had that experience, a family friend had heard that I had gotten interested in bonsai, and they gave me an issue of Bonsai Today, which was, it was a magazine that used to be published in the United States. And inside of this magazine that they gave me one issue of the magazine. I opened it up and started looking at the bonsai inside of it, and I saw the work of Masahiko Kimura, and he was this, revolutionary figure, I came to learn. But I watched, over the course of this article, I watched him transform this shrub that looked like every other shrub I saw in the mountains around me growing up in Colorado. And I watched him transform it into this tree that was so stunning. But the big thing that really stood out to me is it went from being a shrub that was otherwise, fairly lifeless in my mind or not identifiable, into a form that felt like it took on a human character and a human emotion. And when I saw that, I said, I'm going to go study with that guy. That's who I'm going to go study with. And I basically sort of set my intention at 12 years old to pursue a life of bonsai that was going to have the foundation formed by apprenticing myself to Masahiko Kimura, and that's what I did.
Wow. And I was reading, you actually did go study with him, right, in Japan. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. I studied with my master for 6 years.
Wow. Wow. What is that like? What does that entail when you are studying with them? What are you doing on a day to day?
Yeah, well, if you were to pursue an apprenticeship in the modern day, as in like now, it was very different than, 15 or 20 years ago when I started, I guess in 2004 was when I moved to Japan. And Japanese bonsai has experienced a very major shift in its culture and its existence as a traditional art form inside of Japan. But my master was very much a tree maker, which means that he is taking trees and really giving them those initial forms and shapes and styles. He's radically transforming historical trees by reconceptualizing their shape and image. And to be able to work with somebody like that, he was really kind of the last of an era of what I would consider to be like the last vestiges of post-samurai feudalistic culture in Japan, like his generation and his mentality. And so when I draw the difference between a modern day experience, you may go to Japan and you would be working with a tree broker or somebody that would call themselves a bonsai professional, but they're really not pursuing radical design in bonsai. They're more like making trees look pretty, taking it to a show, taking it to an auction, working with clients, sprucing up trees, perpetuating history. Whereas my master was making the historical pieces. And so it's necessary to draw that defining line because the rigor of my apprenticeship is not something that exists necessarily anymore in Japan. It was very, very disciplined. It was 7 days a week. It was as the youngest apprentice, 6 in the morning till midnight, a day off every 3 months. We lived, we ate, we breathed the art of bonsai. And it was incredibly disciplined and very, very difficult.
Wow. That's so interesting. That's interesting that it's like no longer a practice that you could find if you were to go over and do that apprenticeship.
Yeah, you could not find that. You could not find that level and that intensity any longer. More than anything, because times have changed. The world has modernized. The world has become very global. There are a lot of foreign apprentices in Japan now studying with different bonsai professionals. When I went, there were maybe 2 or 3 other foreigners in the entire country working bonsai. I think I was the first foreign apprentice to complete an apprenticeship in its entirety. First non-Japanese person to do so, or one of maybe 2 at that period of time. One of my really good friends from the UK, Peter Warren, was also finishing his apprenticeship right around the same time, but like no foreigner had ever stayed that long and done that kind of intense apprenticeship in the way that it was in existence for the Japanese students that were studying with him.
So I gave a very, very brief introduction of Mirai, but would you mind explaining to the listeners what is Mirai? What do you guys do at Mirai?
Yeah. Well, Bonsai Mirai, which is, now we just call it Mirai. It's kind of taken on a life of its own. When I started, it was just designed to be my garden. In the, studying in Japan, I had this, and studying at the highest level under sort of the father of modern bonsai. My baseline, my bar for what I wanted to accomplish was established at the highest level on a global spectrum. And so I knew I needed a garden when I came back to the United States to do what I wanted to do, which was to work with our native plant material, stunted trees growing in confined rock pockets in the mountain ranges of North America, and to really give them a personality and explore what was possible with this completely unexplored plant palette So Mirai started out as a garden, and over the course of time, Mirai evolved into more than a garden. It evolved into an incubator of thought and concepts and ideas. And as I started working globally in Europe and portions of Asia and Australia and Central and South America, across North America, I started really recognizing that it was undeniable that the culture that a tree was born in and created in was carried in the work, the handling of the tree, the form that the tree took. And I started recognizing there's almost like an anthropological component to bonsai that's really tracking the culture of the environment, the nature of that environment, and the impact that those things had on the individual that was handling that tree, and serving almost as like an objective filtration system for all of their experiences that's manifested in the work that they do on the tree. And so then it was like, okay, so this place has almost like an anthropological value to it, because there's a lot of different artists from a lot of cultures and a lot of different students from a lot of cultures that have come here and studied and put their hands on trees, and this garden carries some of that. But as I continued cultivating bonsai here, all of the things that I learned, I went to horticulture. I studied horticulture at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. And then I went to Japan and pursued my apprenticeship and watched how Mr. Kimura handled the horticulture of his trees in Japan. But like a lot of that did not translate to where I'm at in the Pacific Northwest. So then this place became an incubator for the science of bonsai, the horticulture of bonsai, which is, soils, which is pest and disease, which in more recent times has turned into how do we use regenerative agronomy to be able to cultivate bonsai with a chemical-free approach, and really start to work to not cultivate bonsai at the expense of the environment around me, but cultivate bonsai in compatibility and synergy with the environment around me. And so it became a real significant trial and test group of plants to these different approaches to how we handle the science and the horticulture of cultivating plants in a containerized space. And then we continued kind of like working through this design aspect and looking, because so much of bonsai, if you break bonsai down, bon means tray and sai means tree. So literally the baseline definition of bonsai is a tree in a tray. But bonsai has its power artistically in the representation of a larger tree in a miniaturized form. And on the continent of North America, we just happen to be blessed with the oldest living trees on planet Earth, and the tallest living trees on planet Earth, and the most massive living trees on planet Earth, especially in the Western United States. And so diving into representing time and age in design and trying to quantify that in terms of a vernacular that allows me to convey my concepts as an artist to my students, to convey my concepts as an artist to the greater public at large that has an interest in this art form or what I'm doing or what we're trying to explore. Started to like introduce architecture into this space, introduced a lot of design into this space. Mirai as a company has spent a lot of time with the concept of design, right? Like this form and function, it looks beautiful and it works. And the design of a tree is the perfect definition of design. It has form and it has to function. And so it became an incubator for design. And all of a sudden, like this place has become a really major hub. If you looked out at what I'm looking at right now, there's a garden of 900 trees, but there's also some significant architectural gestures. There's also a compost percolator that we utilize to apply our regenerative agronomical process. And I'm surrounded by my production team, which has really taken bonsai education and democratized the knowledge by starting our online platform, Mirai Live, and our app, Mirai Mobile, to be able to help people who find an interest in this art form have a place to go to begin and to really grow themselves and their knowledge.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there is one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
I'm always looking for ways to show my cat how much I love her. And with Fancy Feast gems, I can pamper her whenever I want with a savory gravy on top of a gourmet mousse pâté. The pyramid shape makes serving simple, so all I have to do is peel and plate to make mealtime feel extra fancy. And with 2 entrees in every pack, it's easy to turn every day into the extraordinary. Fancy Feast gems.
Oh, that's amazing. You mentioned that you guys are curating with like an entirely new plant palette that a lot of people have not seen. What does that include? Like, top of my head, all I can think of is like maybe Rocky Mountain juniper. But like, what are some other ones that you guys are using that you don't see anywhere else?
Yeah, well, so I think like for your listeners, bonsai, it can be made from any tree or shrub, right? It's not, a lot of people have the misconception that bonsai is a species of tree, and it is not. Bonsai is the practice of confining the root space of a tree in a shallow environment, containerized environment, to be able to control the amount of energy that goes into the tree, and using pruning practices, pinching practices to be able to guide and direct the energy to the different growing points of the tree, and then using the application of wire to control the shape of the branches and give the tree form. And so any tree or shrub can be handled in that way. They all need something different. And when I came back from Japan, nobody had really worked with our native plant material to an extensive degree. So Rocky Mountain juniper is maybe the best juniper species in the world to pursue bonsai. And when I came back 15 years ago, people said you can't make a bonsai out of a Rocky Mountain juniper. And they said the same thing about a ponderosa pine, and they said the same thing about a lodgepole pine, and they said the same thing about a bald cypress and a pygmy cypress and a Monterey cypress and a subalpine fir and a mountain hemlock. And, you know, like it just goes on and on and on. We're working with limber pine. We're working with bristlecone pine, the oldest species on earth. We're working with a variety of our native plant deciduous material like vine maple or hawthorns or beeches or hornbeams. So we really, like, the thing that really motivates me and really inspires me is when I find a particularly unique piece of plant material of a species that I've never worked with, and I'm then tasked with figuring out how do I maximize this species' ability to show smaller scale and proportion in its foliar mass and its branching to convey the image of this species in its largest, oldest state in a miniaturized form.
Do you normally start with like a seedling? Are you guys getting cuttings? How do you normally start your bonsai from the beginning?
Yeah, so we work with a group of people that are known in the bonsai world as Yamadori collectors, which Yamadori literally means to dig out of the mountains. And these individuals are people that work hand in hand with the Forest Service, with the BLM, with private landowners to obtain permission to go harvest plant material that is stunted naturally, either stunted by maybe acidic conditions in a bog, maybe stunted by growing on a granite outcropping in the Rockies, and, you know, organic debris collects in a rock pocket and a seedling germinates there. And for 300 or 400 years, it never gets taller than, 2 feet high, but it is wearing the wear and tear of life on that mountain in that really confined environment. And you get these wonderfully contorted forms that are completely unique, and every tree has a very unique soul and spirit. That is really my specialty and my preference. But early on at Mirai, I recognized, having grown up in the Rockies, my dad and I started collecting Yamadori when I was 12. And so that was a part of like my DNA with bonsai. But I realized early on starting Mirai, like not everybody has access to this supremely interesting material. And so I started challenging myself on our platform on Mirai Live to do a nursery stock series where I would just go to a random nursery. I would pick up a random plant that I thought had something interesting or some potential, and to start styling those trees and showing people what's possible with immediately available material that anybody can find at their own local nursery. And so even though like I do work with Yamadori primarily. We have a tremendous amount of nursery stock that was designed to exist in your landscape that we've then applied the same concepts and techniques to. And some of those trees have become some of the best trees in the garden and even outshine trees that are hundreds of years old from the mountains. So we also propagate some of our own material. We propagate stuff from air layers primarily. I grow a lot of mother stock throughout the garden. So I use it as a landscape plant, and when it gets too big, I'll air layer off pieces of it and turn it into my own tree. There's really an unlimited number of ways that you can cultivate material for bonsai, and we try to do a little bit of everything and use it just a little bit more creatively with a higher level of technique than most people have seen to show people what's possible.
Very cool. I had no idea that Yamadori was a thing. That is like a totally new concept to me. My dad even worked with the BLM his like entire career, and maybe he just never came across Yamadori collectors. But I'm gonna have to ask him that now.
Yeah, here's the thing, like that I've realized over the course of time is majority of people have plant blindness, which means that they exist in a world of plants and trees and shrubs all around them, and they never really pay any attention to them, and almost to the degree where they don't even realize they exist, right? And so that happens in the native environment too, where it's like people are out hiking and they might like to hike because they like the weather, they like the physical exertion, they like the views at the top of the mountain or the feel of the cold water when they jump into the lake. But like all along that trail and all along those hillsides, there's potentially tremendous, beautiful plant specimens that have existed for hundreds of years and nobody really even knows or cares about them. You know, like we have a few trees that were collected off of some sites that were going to be cleared for fire suppression in Colorado. And so before they came in and chainsawed all of the trees off of these granite outcroppings that were near some local communities, a few of the collectors that I work with had permission to go in and try to salvage some of the material. And several of the trees had like homesteading hatchet marks in them where people had like chopped off firewood or, you know, like remnants of like human engagement that's hundreds of years old. And so you just kind of like recognize that there's this plant community out there of these tiny shrubs and bushes that nobody really pays attention to or values that are actually like really interesting and have like a tremendous story to tell.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into Yamadori. You mentioned, so Mirai is a whole company, and at the end you mentioned that it's gone into educating people. I'm a little more familiar with like how that can be a business and be monetized because on a very small scale, I'm doing kind of the same thing. But how does Mirai, and I hope this like isn't an offensive question, but like how does it make money? Is it from selling pieces? Is it from students coming in? I would love to know like what does the business part look like and how did that come about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Coming back from Japan, I was I was really reluctant to work with the kind of special trees that I focus my time and attention on, with the notion that I would have to sell them potentially to somebody that was not equipped to take care of them just to keep the lights on in the business. And so I recognized that I had a skill set and a level of knowledge that nobody else did at that time. And still, as we've continued to grow and learn, I do continue to try and pursue my own education to have that capacity to continue to advance my students' level. But in having gone to Japan, I mean, the reason I went to Japan was to learn the things I couldn't learn trying to learn bonsai in the United States. And coming back with that knowledge, I was like, I'm totally comfortable commoditizing knowledge and commoditizing education. Like that feels great to me. People are going to know a lot. I'm going to sell it to them at a reasonable price. I know things other people don't. I can do this. And that was really how Mirai got started and continues to be the biggest portion of how we keep the business going today. Bonsai existed as a traditional art form in Japan, largely practiced under the secrecy of individual gardens and individual masters and their students having these techniques that they did not share, right? And so like the global community seeing bonsai in Japan is like, I want to do it like that. And it's like, you could never obtain those techniques. But as more foreigners have apprenticed and obtained those techniques, there's more and more knowledge And still that was like a leg up that they didn't necessarily want to share. Well, my motivation was not to try and hoard all the knowledge that I gained through my apprenticeship and the experiences that I've had afterwards. It was more to share that as freely as I possibly could while still sustaining the ability to exist as a bonsai professional, with the goal of seeing what happens when you supply everybody with the knowledge, to see what happens artistically in the evolution of the art form. So if you give the techniques and you put them out there and you teach them to students and clients and you put them onto our platforms online, that people that can't be here in physical presence can still obtain that knowledge, what happens artistically? Because more than like the craft of bonsai, the repetition of a traditional model shape and preconceived form of a tree as it's practiced in Japan, I was interested in what does each individual have the capacity to actualize in the trees that they make if they have the highest level of techniques. That's really when you start to get into the most interesting aspect of bonsai as an expression of culture, nature, and the individual. And that rise of artistry in the dissemination of technique inspires me. It pushes me to continue to get better. It creates new ideas that have a dramatic impact on the next piece that I create, or the piece that I create has a dramatic impact on the next piece that somebody else creates. And so through that, like democratization of the knowledge and technique of bonsai that we started to pursue, we've really seen the level of the art form climb very rapidly in North America. And that is really exciting to me, because I think being a foreign apprentice in Japan, I was not Japanese. I was never going to be Japanese. I never had any intention or desire to completely and totally assimilate. But in the experience of being a foreigner, for anybody that's been a foreigner, or sort of like a little bit of an outcast in a highly regimented society and community, I did come back with the desire to see bonsai in North America, with our native species reflecting our native landscape, be able to shine with the same level of inspiring beauty, or even exceed that level of inspiring beauty that I saw in Japan. And the only way that we were going to do that is to provide people with the knowledge that allowed them to maximize their artistic capacity.
Have you seen the interest in bonsai grow as you have been in it? Here in North America specifically?
Very much so. Yeah. And I mean, I think it comes down to like a few different things. So like in the 90s, so bonsai really, bonsai came to the United States in the early 1900s, but was not widely practiced. Bonsai really kind of caught a foothold in the United States after World War II. Like a lot of the GIs were bringing trees back, or were exposed to that culture and started practicing. A lot of Japanese Americans started opening their cultural heritage to Caucasian individuals and facilitating study groups and clubs. California was a big place. Colorado was a big place. Northeastern United States was a big place where that started to happen. But up until like the early 2000s, a lot of the bonsai in the United States were imported from Japan. And then all of a sudden, with like the spread of pests and disease through imported foreign material, the USDA decided, hey, we're no longer going to allow the importation of bonsai, primarily to curb the spread of the Japanese longhorn beetle, which is a tremendously like voracious feeding boring beetle, right? And so when that loss of importation happened, like bonsai in the United States took a major dip. But at that same time in Europe, European bonsai practitioners were starting to utilize their native material. And the European bonsai community started like skyrocketing in quality and artistry and number of practitioners. And I had been collecting Yamadori since I was 12. So since the early 90s, I knew the potential of our native material, but a lot of people were not aware of that. And with the loss of importation, bonsai had to find a replacement for that source of material. And all of a sudden people started growing material in growing fields specifically for bonsai. And people started collecting sustainably out of the mountains. And all of a sudden, we started seeing this potential. But like when I came back in 2010, I think I told you, everybody said Rocky Mountain juniper cannot be a bonsai. Ponderosa pine cannot be a bonsai. Mountain hemlock cannot be a bonsai. And I knew better than that because I had been to Japan and seen that they'd used their native plant material off of this very small landmass, the size of California, the main island of Honshu. And they just took what they had and they made beauty with it, right? And I was like, well, we can do the same thing with the material that we have, and it has to be different because it does not conform to the same value system as the species that are being utilized in Japan. And that was really when I sort of branched away from my traditional training under Mr. Kimura and really started to kind of pursue my own direction.
Going back to the educational part of how you really find a lot of joy in educating others, I noticed that on your website, it talked a lot about having like the science-based education. And I wanted to ask you, like, why is that important to you? I feel like on this podcast, I appreciate that a lot. I feel like that's kind of the mindset I love to have, just like why different things are happening. It makes a lot more sense to me. I feel like even with my 7-year-old, if he knows the base questions of why I'm telling him to do things, then it just makes a whole lot more sense and he goes on his merry way. But why is it important to you when you are educating others to kind of have it science-based?
So bonsai, particularly in Japan, based on the nature of Japanese culture, a bonsai apprentice to a master would dogmatically practice what they were taught. And they never knew why. Because the nature of an apprenticeship, your master does not sit down and say, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. They just say, this is what we're doing, now go do it, right? And so you never got the why. And one of the unique things that I had was I had a horticultural degree before going to Japan. I don't know if there's another Caucasian person. I don't know if there's another bonsai apprentice, even a Japanese bonsai apprentice that had a horticultural degree before pursuing their apprenticeship. So it gave me like a very unique perspective because my education was already science-based in terms of my knowledge of plants. So when I was seeing my master do something really innovative, like removing the dead wood from the living tissue of a juniper and putting, wire spines in the live vein and wrapping raffia around it to apply tension and then folding it in half. Like I could identify each step of that process, why he was doing what he was doing and how that allowed him to achieve what he achieved. So coming back to the United States, North America is a very diverse continent, temperature-wise. I work in Europe a lot. Like I said, I work in Australia and the Mediterranean regions of the world, which is a completely different climatic condition that has a completely different set of rules and circumstances that guide your horticultural approach to bonsai. Well, if I was teaching everybody the dogmatic approach of my apprenticeship that I learned from my master in Japan in, let's just say, zone 8A, right? And now I'm working in zone 9 or I'm working in zone 5, or I'm working in an arid region or a Mediterranean region or a temperate rainforest like I live in now in the Pacific Northwest, that information does not cross apply. And it starts to become more of a detrimental piece of knowledge that I'm giving people than an empowering piece of knowledge, which is what the education that I wanted to provide would give. So coming back to like understanding why we do what we do, what are the physiological indicators that the plant is giving you? When the plant does something that's not normal to its behavior, how do you figure out what's wrong so that you can fix it? Because bonsai demand daily care and daily dedication and attention, and the tree's only communication mechanism is showing you how it feels and what's happening within that tree. And if you do not exercise the muscle of asking yourself, why is it doing it? What have I been doing to this point? What is the tree physiologically doing at this time in the year? What are the conditions of this tree in this container? Then it's really hard because you've got so many variables to get down to the root of the problem and be able to solve it, fix it, improve the tree's health, or let's just go even farther and say, how do I use the horticultural principles of macro and micronutrition to change the tree's growth habit beyond the bonsai container and the pruning and pinching techniques and wiring techniques? How can I use the aspect of nutrition specifically to change the behavior of the tree? Well, you now have to know what the plant needs, essential nutrition in the macro or the micro levels, and how those nutritions overlap and balance each other, where they antagonize each other. The entire level of information that we supply here, even down to the copper wire that we use, and why does annealing copper wire soften it to realign the crystalline structure, and what does it take to anneal copper wire, or how does this small containerized environment behave in cold and in heat, and how do we protect this tree in these erratic conditions that we're getting on a global level as things continue to change. It's like, if you don't know why, there's no possibility at this time in our history as human beings to be able to adapt to the continual change that we're experiencing and successfully cultivate bonsai.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst, healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
Have you run into anyone else that is teaching like you do? Because you mentioned in Japan it's more dogmatic, it's cut and dry. And so you're taking a different approach. Is anyone else like doing this, or have you just noticed that so far it's just you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a tough question to answer myself, because it puts me in that precarious position of being like, I am the only one. I don't want to say that. There's a lot of talented bonsai instructors out there, but I do think that Mirai is what it is because of the way that I teach and the knowledge that I'm constantly trying to obtain. And because I really do try to use the garden as a giant petri dish to understand both the technical component of bonsai, the artistic component of bonsai, but most importantly, the scientific component of bonsai. Like, I have really dabbled in killing this entire garden several times over the past 15 years with like the next horticultural experience that goes horribly wrong, and then had to develop the skills to like pull it back and figure out what just happened and figure out how we move forward, and like the big component of this for me is a lot of people look at bonsai as a vanity art form, right? It's like this object to obtain and own. But bonsai is like one of the greatest mirrors to reflect who you are in an honest and very straightforward visual communication. Like, I can look at a tree, Rachel, if I asked you to style a bonsai tree, I could tell if you were tense, I could tell if you were nervous, I could tell if you were completely uninterested, not by your facial expressions, but by the way that you handled the tree, the feel of the wire that you put on the tree. If I asked you to draw a picture of a tree, I would know immediately where you're from, or at least where you were born, or where your first memories were forged. It is a mirror reflection of the individual. And so, like this like commodity, like I make a living off of educating people. I sell my trees to students that we've educated or collections that I curate, almost specifically and solely, because I know they have the capacity to take care of the trees that we've made. But ultimately, the scientific experiments have all been geared towards how do we get to a chemical-free cultivation methodology in the environment, because so many of like the modern industrial ag approaches that we've applied are starting to fail, or are failing on a grand level, right? Glyphosate in 85% of the food on a supermarket shelf these days. That's not good for the human body. Mass die-off of invertebrates and pollinators. I think over half of the honeybees in certain regions of North America died this past year. like that is catastrophic decline. That is catastrophic failure. And that methodology didn't work. And I saw it in the garden, taking the chemical approach that a lot of bonsai practitioners apply that has sustained Japanese bonsai for a long time. And I noticed I didn't have any bees anymore. I noticed I didn't have any butterflies anymore. I noticed I didn't have any snakes and lizards anymore. I noticed I didn't have a lot of bird life anymore. And, I had a young son. He's out playing in the garden. I've got, rocks that have water pooling up in them. I didn't want that environment for him. And that really motivated this change towards, can I do this a different way? And that's really when we went into the regenerative agronomical approach. And we're 5 years into the regenerative agronomical approach that we cultivate our trees with, which is basically sustainable nutrition and balancing the tree's nutritional content on the internal side of the tree. We've got a plethora of pollinators. We've got snakes and lizards everywhere. Birds are overly abundant, but I'll deal with them because they do like to tear up the moss on the trees and like harvest the biology in the containers. But this year we saw like monarch butterflies back for the first time. And that means a lot. Like we all have the capacity to make a sustainable shift in the way that we manage ourselves in our own individual environments. We cultivate a lot of our own food here, independent of the bonsai as well, knowing that that's like a really big part of a life well lived. And so all of those things matter significantly and speak to the power of bonsai as a very big vehicle for change, and a time capsule that holds the human nature interaction, but also a scientific validator of what's possible if we just look for better ways to go about our existence and our interaction with the natural environment.
Mm-hmm. So a large portion of my audience, they are pretty new to bonsai. This isn't like a podcast that is specifically towards people who are super familiar with it. So I kind of wanted to spend some time talking about maybe something that beginners would want to know, starting off with the question of where should a beginner start with bonsai? And do you have like any specimens that you would suggest that a beginner starts with in the beginning?
Yeah. So, the entire reason that we created Mirai Live, which is an online educational platform, live.bonsaimirai.com. Go there. You can see what we make, but we created that platform to teach bonsai at a higher level, right? But like once we started teaching at a higher level, we had these people that started getting interested, and they're like, that's awesome that you're working with 500-year-old trees. I've never done this before. What do I do? And so we created this series called the Beginner Series, which basically like takes you to a nursery, shows you exactly what you should be looking for to find a piece of nursery material that has some merit and can be a good bonsai, and then walks you through the step-by-step process of how you prune that tree for the first time, how you learn how to wire, how you repot that tree into a bonsai container, including the soils that you'll need, the tools that you'll need, the technique that you'll need, the timing. So if somebody said, how do I begin bonsai? The first thing I'm going to say is you need to check out the educational content that we've created. We made an app, Mirai Mobile, which is on your phone. It's a calendar of what to do and when to do it for a majority of the species that you could ever use in bonsai. And the best part about it is it will actually notify you when you need to do it, so you don't need to go look and figure it out yourself. But if somebody was just like, okay, cool, we'll check that out later, I want to do bonsai. Awesome. Go to a local nursery. Look for something that catches your eye. It's a leaf color, it's a fruit, it's a interesting trunk or bark or needle, or something that helps you to fall in love with that plant. Like something where you're like, oh, that stands out from all of these other trees. Because the most important thing with bonsai is that you love the tree that you start with, right? No great bonsai was ever made from somebody saying, I don't like that tree, but I'm going to make it a bonsai. That never has worked in the history of bonsai creation. You have to fall in love with something about a tree that gives you that durability to the challenge that you are taking on of trying to cultivate this thing in a way that magnifies its visual capacity to represent nature in miniature. And then, the other thing I would say to any beginner is like, once you find that tree, the first step isn't let's go home, chop it up, put it in a bonsai pot. That also doesn't work. You have to work at the pace of the tree, right? Like that means maybe we prune it at the correct time of year. Maybe we repot if it's spring. And maybe we should seek some people that have some experience with this in our local region for clubs, which in North America, there are a tremendous number of bonsai clubs across the country. In almost every state, there are dozens of clubs with people in your area that are pursuing this art form and understanding the nuances of cultivating bonsai in any specific region. I saw you're in Utah, right?
I am.
You in Salt Lake?
I'm about 40 minutes away from Salt Lake, just kind of down by Utah Lake. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Salt Lake has a great bonsai club.
Oh, does
and
it?
if Salt Lake's bonsai club doesn't work out for you that well, there's like some great practitioners in Ogden.
Okay.
There's a lot of people bonsai right on the Idaho border. There's also a great club in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is close if you're on the eastern side of Utah, right? Like bonsai clubs are an indispensable resource for your like local needs and local information.
Okay, that's good to know. I might have to look some up that are around me because I have, so you mentioned like having a love for the specimen that you start with. And I have this little oak tree that I collected when we first moved to this city. And I collected it just from the park that my kids were always playing at. And it's been okay. It's hanging in there. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should switch this around. Instead of trying to get it to a full grown tree that I can plant one day, maybe I should create a bonsai out of it, because I feel like that would be a lot more rewarding for me. And I'm not sure if it's going to make it into a full grown tree right now. So I'm like, maybe I'll just start small.
Yeah. I will say you're biting off a lot starting with a quercus just because they
Really?
tend to be a little bit finicky. Yeah, but not to deter you. There's quirks to it. You just got to know what they are.
Okay. I'll have to do some research on them then. So on that topic though, what are some common mistakes that you see with people doing bonsai?
I think the biggest mistake with people doing bonsai is like not understanding that the plant is an energy system, right? And anytime that you work on a plant, you need to be working on the plant when it is in an energy positive state. So spring prior to the flush of new leaves growing on a tree is your number one energy positive state. And that is the time where you would repot a tree and work on the roots, or or potentially prune the foliage, and if you are so inclined, wiring the branches, right? And then the tree spends a tremendous amount of energy growing all of its needles and all of its leaves. Well, when all of that growth comes out, that tree's now in an energy negative. And if you work on a tree in an energy negative period of time, it doesn't have the energy to respond to what you did positively. And in fact, if you work on it in a completely depleted state, it's probably going to be the end of the tree. But then all that foliage hardens off and that tree starts reaccumulating its energy. And we get to, through the summer season where that foliage is needed to help the tree transpire and cool itself through the summer heat. And you get to the early fall, which is like the second most important time or premier time to be pruning a tree or wiring a tree, because now it's in an energy positive state again. So the biggest thing I would tell beginners is understand that trees are in positive states of energy and negative states of energy, and we need to be working on them when they're in a positive state of energy. Okay, now that's an advanced little piece. The second thing I would tell beginners is bonsai are designed to be outdoor trees. They're not designed to be cultivated indoors. There's not enough light. They need temperature fluctuations. A lot of our temperate species need dormancy. But inside of that, when you put a tree in a tiny container, it cannot tolerate the same sun, the same heat, or the same cold. So although we have to cultivate them outdoors, we've got to help them a little bit, especially if we're in an extreme environment like Utah or the Rocky Mountains, right? Or in a desert environment, or here in the Pacific Northwest. I've got to help a lot of my trees out by sheltering from the rain over the winter because it's actually too wet for a lot of the trees that we cultivate here. But understanding that they need to be outdoors, that finding that right environment and giving them a little bit of help in that environment to ease the burden of them being in a small container, trying to endure what they're larger counterparts planted in the ground are capable of enduring is part of the practice of bonsai, and a big part of the practice of bonsai. And number three, we can't do too much at once, right? Like the enthusiastic of a beginner is their greatest superpower in bonsai. Like that is when you can do incredibly amazing things, surprise yourself by the number of trees that you're going to buy to pursue this art form. The addiction, the bug, the virus, whatever you want to call the bonsai passion, like it is real. And all of a sudden we've got 100 trees, and we take a tree and we put it on our turntable and we prune it and we wire it, and then we take it out of the pot and we repot it. And then that tree 6 weeks later is dead, and it's totally devastating because we loved it. That's how we started, right? So doing a little bit at a time when a tree's in an energy positive state, and finding that environment in the garden where that tree has the capacity to thrive sets you up for fundamentally already being exponentially farther ahead and having success in the bonsai practice for a beginner.
And I have this question, kind of going back, but if you were to go out and collect your own specimen from the wild, do you need a permit to do that? Because I don't want to encourage people to just go out and be plucking things off where they shouldn't be.
Yeah. I'm glad that you circled back to this. So first and foremost, collecting trees out of the native environment is one of the most difficult things that you can do horticulturally, right? It requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise. And most people get excited about collecting the tree, but fail to think about what they have to do when they get that tree home, as far as what soil you're going to put it in and what box are you going to build for that? Where are you going to put this and care for it until it's able to reacclimate and generate and recover from this operation? And so what a lot of people do is they get very, very excited about collecting a tree, but they don't have the knowledge to be able to keep it alive. And there's nothing more devastating than collecting a tree and watching it die, right? Because it was doing just fine out in the mountains, and then we take it out. So I don't encourage people to go and start that way. I think starting with nursery stock and trees that are more accessible, that are younger in age and more durable to the mistakes we're going to make in the beginning, is a really important place to start and to obtain your knowledge. But if you are so inclined, permission is absolutely necessary. So collecting a tree illegally is this poaching an animal, right? It is completely against the law. It does come with significant repercussions. Collecting trees without permission can significantly jeopardize the ability for everybody else to use our tremendous gift of public lands in the same way that we've been able to use them up to this point. And so being responsible, being courteous, getting permission, leaving no trace when you collect, so that is completely invisible what you've done, which does require site restoration, etc. All of these things go with the moral and ethical code of tapping into the tremendous opportunity we have of this natural resource that we're gifted with in North America. And I think, and would really request that people treat it with a tremendous amount of respect.
I'm glad I asked, because I was thinking about that. I was like, there's probably a lot more to it than you're just out on a walk and you pluck something up. So I'm glad that I asked that. I wanted to end with this final question, and this might be kind of a loaded one, because it sounds like you could go so many different ways with this question with your experience in bonsai. But my question is, are there any life lessons that bonsai has taught you?
Oh my gosh. Oh man. I'm looking at my team around me. They're all like kind of smiling. It's everything that I am now is largely because of bonsai. Because I look at 900 trees that are reflecting back to me what I bring to them every day. So it's hard to miss my shortcomings and also my strengths that I possess as an individual. I was never a patient individual. And I think that's again, these phases in life, you have these superpowers. And one of the superpowers of youth is impatience and the energy to be able to pursue life without patience. And as you see people get older, they are called wiser, right? Because they've been beat down by their lack of patience and poor decisions and learned, oh man, if I do that, it's going to be way more painful than it's worth. So as cliche as it sounds, I would say that patience has been one of these life lessons that bonsai has taught me in a multitude of really painful ways. But less cliche than that, I would say durability as a life lesson, right? Like everybody knows you've got to keep going. Like there's not a lot of other options. Like you get knocked down, you get back up. I have always been impressed with the will of a plant to live and what they will do to survive and how they go about surviving, which I find to be really inspiring because when you look at trees, I would say trees are the constant protagonists. They may be the highest level of intelligence because they do not make decisions that detriment themselves. They're always objectively responding to the environment in the most positive of ways and contributing on a grand scale to the health of the ecosystem around them. And there is a lot to take from that lesson when you start breaking down the science of Susan Simard and some of these other really keystone researchers that recognized it was community, not competition, that gave rise to the forest ecosystem and the environment that we value. So I think I answered that with like 5 life lessons, but I've learned a lot from bonsai. It's really formed who I am.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Ryan, to kind of pick your brain and learn from you. I appreciate you coming on. And for those that are listening, where can they keep up with Bonsai Mirai and what you guys are up to and with some of the educational content that you guys have?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity, Rachel. I really have enjoyed listening to your podcast and getting to familiarize myself with what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing very much, making this information accessible. If somebody wanted to find us, Bonsai Mirai on Instagram, bonsaimirai.com we still have a website, and we actually do tend to the website. Like it's one of our major vehicles to show our work, inspiration. We still write blogs periodically. We podcast Asymmetry on, Apple iTunes. Live.bonsaimirai.com is our educational platform. Mirai Mobile is our educational app and bonsai guide. So there's a number of avenues that people can access what we do and get to see, the world that is Mirai and the art of Ryan Neal.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for coming on. I know that I'm going to be checking out the live Bonsai Mirai because I need a lot of help as I am a complete beginner starting out, especially with, my oak tree. Might be more than I'm able to chew, but we'll kind of figure it out with your help. So thank you again thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it, Rachel. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode. And you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School podcast.